Welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri. As always, with Alok Pandey. We are continuing Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto 9, Kingdoms and Godheads of the Greater Mind, which we will complete today, and we'll go into the next Canto 10. So you wanted to...
Yeah, we are in paradise, but for a moment we are just jumping ahead because of this question which rose up about mother, who is she? And I think it is wise and humbling to remember what Aurobindo writes in Savitri. Several places there is a description of the Divine Mother. Right in the beginning, Book 1, Canto 2, where she is the embodiment of love, as you were mentioning. But look at this on page 276. Several places. And it starts with, but thought nor word can seize eternal truth. The whole world lives in a lonely ray of her sun. In our thinking's close and narrow lamplit house, the vanity of our shut mortal mind dreams that the chains of thought have made her ours, but only we play with our own brilliant bonds. Tying her down, it is ourselves we tie. That's why I am personally wary of all mental conceptions of the divine, especially about Divine Mother, who is freedom and infinity embodied. And we'll not go into the details of these lines because we'll come at some point in a natural way, but just to read them is sheer delight. In our hypnosis by one luminous point, we see not what small figure of her we hold. We feel not her inspiring boundlessness. We share not her immortal liberty. Thus is it even with the seer and sage. This I wish to emphasize because, especially we in India, we have plenty of literature. And there are all the seers and sages of all varieties, degrees of realization, and and there is a reason why I'm saying this. See, there are places in India, I see places like Uttar Pradesh, MP, where there is so much traditional bhakti and knowledge, but they find very difficult to open to the Mother and Aurobindo. And their tradition has become their roadblock. Why? Because they are limiting the Divine Mother by a book or the conception or the experience or the realization of a seer and a sage. There can be nothing beyond it. And Aurobindo reminds us, thus is it even with the seer and sage, for still the human limits the divine. So what is needed? Out of our thoughts, we must leap up to sight. And how to do it? Look at the step-by-step process. Breathe her divine, illimitable air. Her simple, vast supremacy confess. Dare to surrender to her absolute. Aurobindo's letter in the Mother, he says the surrender has to be made to the Divine Mother, not even to her force, but to the Mother. Because now people say that now supramental force is there, we don't need to surrender. Logical, very true. Aurobindo uses the word, very logical. But he says that those who have tried it have landed in a horrible cropper. I am not elaborating on that now because when the time comes. But this is basically the ego holding back. Then the unmanifest reflects his form in the still mind as in a living glass. The timeless ray descends into our hearts and we are wrapped into eternity. In the last 4 lines, which are at once humbling and liberating.
Yes.
Both. For truth is wider, greater than her forms. 1,000 icons they have made of her, and find her in the idols they adore. The worshipper of Durga finds her in Durga. The worshipper of Kali finds her in Kali. The worshipper of Lakshmi finds her in Lakshmi. Yes. The worshipper of Saraswati finds her in Saraswati. But is she limited by any of them? No. But she remains herself and infinite. Even the gods never understand her play. And it's so beautiful to know this. It sounds very subtle, but it is this which saves us from many disasters. None can know her. And it's good to remain always with the wonder of the child. So we come back to the paradise where such
the
a
life
beautiful
gods.
description. Yes, paradise of the life gods.
We were on page 236.
Yes. And we had read this wonderful line, made sense, a road to reach the intangible. So, only if the senses are completely purified, any part, if you want to make the heart to reach the soul beloved, the heart has to be purified of all dross. If you want to make the mind to reach the intangible, the highest, the unmanifest, the mind has to learn to be completely quiet, still, and purified of all these countless thoughts that are humming around to really arrive at that. So, this is a heaven where one gets an access when the vital energy, the life force, is purified. And therefore, even pleasure becomes, at another place in Canto 3 of this book, he says, pleasure becomes a candidate of heaven's fire. So, this is a heaven of purified sense. It thrilled with the supernal influences. So the sign of purification is that it responds to the divine touch, to the divine call, to the divine sight, and no more to anything which is like an inferior note. That build the substance of life's deeper soul, earth, nature stood reborn, comrade of heaven. That's how you know it. So he is giving us a practical way to arrive at that. And someone asked me recently, what is purity in this yoga? So purity in this yoga is not about moral purity, and one may be morally pure and from the divine point of view worth nothing. One may be shut in a ivory tower of rigidity and even this sense of self-righteousness. And moral purity is a human concept. It's helpful at a certain stage of evolution. It helps to tame the animal in us to an extent. But it also can become like a aborted birth, because people who are very moral, they can't understand the divine and his ways in the world, because in the world the divine does not act apparently morally. Our conception of world, a moral world. One thing is very clear, it's not a very simple moral world. And that's why we have created theories like karmic law to justify poor divine's case. But the divine is free. He doesn't act according to any of these laws, but according to a deeper law. So what is purity in this yoga? Purity is to be entirely under the influence of the divine. That's how the mother had described it. So when the senses are completely under the influence of the divine, they are pure. When the life energy is fully under the influence of the divine, it's pure. And we can see how difficult it is. Almost sounds impossible. Moral purity is much easier. So what is expected is much, much greater. A fit companion of the timeless kings, equaled with the godheads of the living sons. Let's look here. He has used an expression, sons. We know of only one son, the supramental son. But Aurobindo speaks of even 7 sons of the supermind. Each aspect of the supermind is a son. And it is also reflected on other planes of consciousness, where also you can see the sun as a reflected power, like in the calm lake or through the moon. So there are, each plane of consciousness has its own sun, has its own moon, has its own powers. And so he is using the expression living sons. So these are conscious sons, conscious godheads. At another place during Savitri's birth, when Savitri describes herself to death, she says, and all these sons were conscious at my birth.
Yes.
All these sons were conscious. That means all the powers which are directly powers of the supramental Godhead, the divine himself, they were consciously present, waiting. Divine Mother has come, we'll go to you. They are waiting for her to come. He mixed in the radiant pastimes of the unborn. The unborn are, playing. What are they playing? With the future. This future which is not yet created, not yet entered into the field of manifestation. And Ashwapati is mixing with them, seeing their game. Maybe, he's also allowed to play a dice or two.
The laws of the unknown.
Yes, create the known. Yes. Heard whispers of the player never seen. In this plane you cannot see, but you can sense. That's why, it's a purified sense. So it's very interesting. There is a veil, thin veil, which that's why he has to go beyond. And listen to his voice that steals the heart and draws it to the breast of God's desire. This is Krishna, of course. By the very word Krishna means that which draws. So Krishna was not the name of a God. It was that aspect of the divine, the Anandamay, who draws creation towards him. Because ultimately man is drawn towards joy and he finds joy inadequate. And eventually there comes a time when nothing else but the divine, his companionship, his friendship alone can satisfy him. So then he sees, he is the player who was drawing me through all these games. So he is the eternal trickster, the player. When Aurobindo was asked, what is Krishna's play? He said it is the play of the evolution. It is the evolutionary play where you are led towards perfection from one stage to another. And felt its honey of felicity flow through his veins like the rivers of paradise. That is the Amrit Chakna. In Sikhism they have Amrit Chakna. Even in Hinduism we have, but unfortunately it has become a ritual where you go to a temple and somebody gives you and you say it is Amrit. Or you go to in Sikh temple Gurdwara and you have this Amrit and you have become now Amrit tasted. But Amrit is not tasted like that. That is a symbol. The Amrit is tasted not when it's just the water which has washed an idol's feet. It's a symbol. By your faith you can activate it. But the real Amrit is when you touch that waters which wash the feet of the Lord himself. That's the origin of the Ganges. That's how it is said. That one of the stories, there are of course various origins of Ganges, but one of the names of Ganges is derived from because she has washed the feet of the Lord. Sursari, that's how it goes, And there is a beautiful description in Ramcharitmanas about Jinit Charanana se Niksi Sursari. So they have come out of the feet of the Lord. So if you ascend to that level of consciousness by constant meditation on the feet of the Lord, you taste that Amrit and you become one of the immortals. God's slaves become immortal. Made body a nectar cup of the Absolute. The very body is thrilled with the contact of the divine and the divine love. In sudden moments of revealing flame, in passionate responses half unveiled, he reached the rim of ecstasies unknown. A touch supreme surprised his hurrying heart. The clasp was remembered of the wonderful. And hints leaped down of white beatitudes.
So he's only reached the rim.
And what is this remembered? You see, it's very interesting. In Upanishad, sometimes the word for awakening or enlightenment is remembrance.
Yes.
You remember. What do you remember? Who you are. So, before creation started, we were one in the lap, on the bosom of God. And suddenly you remember. Aurobindo, today only I was sharing this in Desiree. Champakl's first gesture when he saw the Lord was he lay down at his feet. 1 hour he kept lying and Aurobindo kept waiting for him. And now see the divine response. The Lord's last response to Champaklal is that he embraces him.
Yes.
Immortalized in his painting. Now, this embrace is not just an embrace of bhakti. People who are not bhaktas cannot understand what it means. This embrace contains everything. It is becoming one with Him. He has merged with the Lord. That's why Mother, in one of the messages, told him, one of the 100, and you have become a portion of the Lord. Portion of the Lord. So, how do you enter into that state? Through that love, through that
the most
clasp which is remembered. The original clasp. Yes.
The most beautiful flower of maybe 60 or 80 that I sent to Mother, she named Remembrance of Sri Aurobindo.
Yes.
And the botanical of it is Lobelia erinus, Cambridge blue.
This is another very interesting, it reminds me of a flower because we are sharing this. It's a variety of rose which Mother has called tender love for the divine.
Yes.
And Mother says you don't find it even in heaven, you find it only on earth.
Yeah.
Because in heaven they don't know what it means to love tenderly, no suffering, no pain. It's relevant to what we are going to read,
Yes.
because you don't have that. They don't understand what is tenderness. So tenderness is uniquely human because we are constantly faced with the fragility of the form and the hurt, the pain. So we develop that side of tenderness.
And Mother gives her tenderness very often
yes.
in Avec mon tendresse. Yeah? With my tenderness.
Yes. Eternity drew close, disguised as love. Oh, what a disguise this is. Why is using the word disguise? See, eternity is eternity. It is there, self-existent. But what is love? When eternity leans towards the transient. So many people who seek the Brahman as through knowledge, they don't understand. They feel love is a coming down. But what they don't understand it, eternity flows into love and clasps creation. So it is that aspect of the eternal which leans down. So, it feels disguised as love. And laid its hand upon the body of time. So that's what, yes, it connects the time to the... A little gift comes from the immensitudes, but measureless to life its gain of joy. All the untold beyond is mirrored there in this world of paradise of the life gods. A giant drop of the bliss unknowable overwhelmed his limbs and round his soul became a fiery ocean of felicity. This giant drop which has come from above, this spilled from heaven elsewhere, a nectar spilling from God. This is a story in the Puranas of the gods and the titans who fight over the nectar. And few drops when they are, fighting with each other, not very good sight, and they fight. But nevertheless, when they are fighting, few drops spill down. So it is said that wherever these drops fell down, they become sacred spots in India. So that's where you have the Kumbh Mela and the Mahakumbh Mela. So one of them is in Allahabad. So there they say the Ganga, Jamuna and Saraswati meet. But see, it's a symbolic. It's not about many sadhus going there and dancing, doing a fashion show and jumping around naked. It's not about that. It's about that within us we have Ganga, Jamuna, the left and the right side. Jamuna is the left current and the Ganga is the right current, subtle current. And Saraswati is the balancing, the middle current. And when the three are found together, that's what is Sangam. And then you taste that nectar, the giant drop of the bliss, which is mirrored in paradise. So if you are a yogi of that tantric capacity, then you're merely visiting a kumbh and putting your name in the register. Gods are not very pleased with all this, But anyways, it's good as a memory and a symbol. Overwhelmed his limbs and round his soul became a fiery ocean of felicity. He foundered, drowned in sweet and burning wasps. The dire delight that could shatter mortal flesh. The rapture that the gods sustain, he bore, because he has purified himself, made himself vast, a candidate. That is what is called adhikar bhed. And Aurobindo says modern mind has forgotten it. See, in olden times, not everybody, it was not like, anybody can come, walk into Mother and Aurobindo, have their darshan and say, okay, I am on this path of yoga. You can't do that. There is an adhikar bhed. If you are not ready, that current can finish you. Someone, Aurobindo had told Nirodha not to bring him, or he had not told, but Nirodha told this fellow Chand that, doesn't matter, you come, you have the darshan. He took it for granted. And when he came and mother said he was not ready and now he'll have to go through a lot of suffering. And his life was so interesting that he went through a lot of suffering and he would keep wiring Aurobindo, Lord, help me. And Aurobindo says, here is a man blundering at every step but invoking to help. And he would help. That's a different thing. Blundering at every step. But that's how destiny operates. So otherwise one will be shattered. Immortal pleasure cleansed him in its waves. Now look at it. Immortal pleasure cleansed him in its waves and turned his strength into undying power. Immortality captured time and carried life. So thus ends this canto, and it's important to remember this, that this description, apart from many other things, it has a very sobering effect. I personally believe, that's why I am so wary of any mystic claiming all kinds of things. I have seen people claim that golden light. Other day we were talking, I'll give you one story of, actually in Delhi ashram, not the ashram, but there is the Delhi Society Center, where there are relics of Aurobindo. And 5 of us used to go there and sit and read every evening some book or the other of Aurobindo. And on Sunday mornings we used to go. So mornings there used to be pranic healing parallel sessions going on, and we used to wonder. So there would be chaos there and we were just sitting around the samadhi and reading. So one day I overheard a conversation between a young neophyte who had just come, paid some money to have a pranic healing course for whatever number of days. And second day, one shouldn't overhear, but it just happens. It was within the hearing range and they were loud enough. He was telling the master with, inverted commas that, I am seeing a golden light. And he said, you are in contact with the supermind. When you see countless such things, you have to have that tremendous purity and strength and vastness. Not a trace of ego to be able to bear. And mother has said this is the first condition. If she said 3 conditions to get the touch of the supermind. One is wideness, second is plasticity, and then third, she said, perfect immobility. If there is a slight tremor, the supermind doesn't act. Who can fulfill these conditions? So this is but it's so easy to get in touch with this world and feel that you are touching the highest. And I believe this is what happened to many mystics who had this mirrored worlds. And they saw there and said, this is it. It is Ananda. It is Ananda Lok. It is not even the world of Krishna. Though you can hear the flute, you can hear his whisper, you can feel the presence of the player, and you have this impression with that love and Ananda that you are face to face with none else but you are in Krishna Dham.
It's world of delight.
World of delight. It's not the world of delight. It's a mirroring of that world within the realm of ignorance. And that's why Buddha, knowing this problem, refused to give any importance to any of these intermediary steps. That's why, because he knew that mankind gets caught and there is a kind of mysticism which can easily fascinated by experiences, and it gets trapped into these experiences and thinks it has arrived at, what can be greater than Ananda? And thinks it has gone past supermind because Ananda is beyond. So it's important to remember this and to read what Aurobindo writes next. We had the paradise gained, and now we have paradise lost.
And from that darkest pit,
yes,
he ascended into this.
Because you have to go through that. The dark pit is the cleansing process. The night of the soul is a time when all that we clung to, thinking this is what is me, the pride, the ego, the lust, the greeds, are stripped off. Now we become a candidate for entering paradise because we have gone through the war, the battle. If we don't go through this inner battle, we can't enter this realm. Trishanku cannot enter. He is denied. He says, you can't go just because Vishwamitra is doing tapasya on your behalf. You don't have purity enough in your flesh. Because, he wanted to go with the body. He says, your body, by nature, it is not pure. It cannot, he can't enter even the paradise. Forget about, going further. So this is the secret that is being revealed to us simultaneously of these worlds, of these gods, of how we can, easily mistake one for the other, and above all, of the process of yoga, which must go through a phase of purification, which has a negative side and a positive side. The negative side of the purification is the descent into night, where you learn discernment, because you are hit from every side and you begin to learn to distinguish the one truth and all the other coverings and deceptive appearances. And there is a positive side where you purify your senses, your thoughts, your life energy, so that they can mirror or feel some touch of the wonderful. And having done that, now there is a fall. This is the biblical story of the fall of Adam and Eve from the paradise. So what bit them? The knowledge. They tasted the apple, and with that came the urge to know. As long as you are in this beautiful paradise, there are mystics who don't want to know. And you tell them that, no, we are tasting Ananda. Dionysians. So they don't want to. But the moment you want to know, then you start another evolutionary curve. You go from one hill down and take another hill, which will go higher. But first you touch base.
Yes.
That's how the Vedas describe, from one hill to another. So you come down. So this coming down, because now a mental evolution is going to start. On earth it takes the form of mental evolution. Mother said there was a time when humanity was in a state of paradise. She was asked, was there ever an earthly paradise? She says yes. And that was a time when man was more or less pran chinmay. He was more, the mind is not really manifested. Very simple. He was like an animal, spontaneous, natural, simple, without the complexity which mind brings. And she says it was a beautiful, harmonious state, and I remember it because she and Aurobindo were there. But then the moment mind came in, we lost it. Now came dualities, now came shame, guilt, good, bad, right, wrong, and all this has come. And now, but she says, when you cross this, then you will arrive at the highest. So, paradise must be left behind and a mental evolution begun. So we have Canto 10, the kingdoms and godheads of the little mind. Now it must start again from scratch. Even a great mystic, if he has to learn mathematics, he has to start from 1 + 1 = 2. He can intuitively decipher a few things, but it's a different kind of a knowledge. So this too must now be overpassed and left, as all must be until the highest is gained. This is renunciation in this yoga. Renunciation is not renouncing that I'll wear only white or saffron or this kind of a show of renunciation. It's more like a pride. Because nowadays sannyasis sell a lot. Brand sannyasis are big market. All that you need is to wear an orange robe and walk into the airport. Most likely security will take you through the special quota, you may even hide bombs, God knows. Of course, there are true sannyasis. And I must say, mother had corrected. When, Aurobindo's aphorism where Aurobindo says that what is true sannyasa? It is like King Janak. And it does not need to robe itself in this color. And mother, laughed at it and gave her comment. But later on she said, of course, I am not talking of the genuine ones for whom the ochre robe is an expression of their inner state. And obviously one can think of Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda and these rare ones. But otherwise, true renunciation is renunciation not only of the ego, self and desire, but even the spiritual gains. You have to become like a baby. Whatever experiences and realizations, you have to remember you are a little baby. And one example I remember is of Kapali Shastri. Yeah, many others.
Yes.
So when he was asked, you have done so many types of yoga, Vedanta, Tantra, and he wrote Siddhanjana, Rig Veda, Bhashya, and still what a humility. When somebody asked him, when he stopped writing further, when Sri Aurobindo physically withdrew, why aren't you writing further? Because there is nobody to verify or ratify it, something to that effect. Because Sri Aurobindo has to say, okay. And when he is asked on his, toward the later part of his life, that you have done so many kinds of sadhana. What did you get out of all this? He says, why? They brought me to the feet of the Divine Mother.
Yes.
The greater the wisdom, the more humble you become. That is the sign of wisdom. So he leaves behind that paradise. If you hold on to the paradise, you have paradise, but not something else. That's what he's going to reveal to us. And what is the sign of the highest? That also is describing. As all must be until the highest is gained, in whom the world and self grow true and one. If it is Jagat Mithya, it's not the highest. In whom the world and self, Jagat Satyam na Mithya, Brahma Satyam na Mithya, they grow true and one. It is the one who manifests in the world, it is the one who draws himself back into the unmanifest. And they are one reality, not two. So that's what, when we arrive at that, then we have learned the greatest secret. Till that is reached, our journeying cannot cease. So this other one which withdraws from material life, the mother uses the word misguided and egoistic mysticism. Out of a misguided egoism, we withdraw. But you have to arrive at that where the two become one. Always a nameless goal beckons beyond. We give it names. There was a very nice, Sri Aurobindo in Synthesis speaks of the integral conception of the divine. This nameless goal is very interesting. So how can we, nameless means what? So how do we proceed? We use some goal, no? We use surveys or we union with the divine, etc. It's transformation. So why Sri Aurobindo is using the word nameless? So, Mother was asked, Sri Aurobindo is telling us to go with the integral conception of the divine. What does it mean? She says, when we start, we need a conception. So, we may say divine is love, divine is power, divine is beauty, divine is knowledge, etc., etc. And we give a working idea of the yoga, the method, the process, the goal. But she says, as you go further and further, you discover vaster and vaster. And a time comes when it is impossible to say this is divine and this is undivine.
Yes.
She says, of course. Then she corrects. She says, yes, you need it for practical. When you do action, you need to know this. You are moving from a lesser divine state to a greater divine state. You cannot say I am moving from evil to good, because that is compartmentalizing. You can say I am moving from a state of lesser divinity to a greater divinity. I am moving from the divinity of the past and the present to the divine of the future. That's how she said, when I say Om Namo Bhagavate, I am invoking the divine of tomorrow. That's how she is. She So, nameless goal. Why it is nameless? Because we give it name, but names are only conveniences. They are devices. We should not make it the end. Till we arrive at the inconceivable. Always ascends the zigzag of the gods. So each of these like passing the parcel. Each god is a power. In the mother, Sri Aurobindo says, when all these four great goddesses have done their work in you and harmonized their working, then you are ready for the supramental Mahashakti. You can't just have one God, whether it be love or strength or wisdom. So each of them works in their own way. So when you are, one aspect is worked upon, maybe in course of several lives, who knows? And you have perfected the power of love. Mahalakshmi's love. Now comes strength. Now when strength comes, strength is very different. The Kshatriya is called upon to destroy. How does he reconcile love? He starts from that new angle. So now another god is training. Aryaman, Kali, Durga, they are training. So Lakshmi has to stay in the background. Then other gods, wisdom. And that's why Sri Aurobindo says, who is the last goddess who takes the work? Mahasaraswati. She says, okay, now all this is done. Now perfection. So zigzag. Why? Because it seems that you have lost, like the paradise lost. And you are starting again. So it's not like just going like a straight line. You go like this. And there is an ascension. But each god takes up the work and perfects. Then you pick up what you had already achieved in another life. Harmonize the two. And that's the constant process. In one place, Mother says, very interesting, though she has given a diagram of straight line, and that is in a certain context. But another place she says, the shortest path is not necessarily the straight path. Right. Because then it's a path where there is self-deprivation and self-denudation. But not the path of perfection.
When Mother told me all those words about the gardens, at the very end, she raised her hand and she started moving it in a spiral direction upwards.
Yes.
And she said, one must know how to move from consciousness to consciousness.
Yes. And that is also the spiral of evolution.
Yes.
From one level to another to another. And then when all are ready, then suddenly you take up all of them together. So it's a zigzag. In the Rig Vedas, it is like, you go to one god, then when God trains you, then he must take a test. Of course, they put it like he creates an obstruction. He says, you're not going to another class. And when he takes the test and the Rishi is ready, he says, please let me go, sir. Don't you think I've graduated in your school? Then finally he says, okay. Then the other god takes him up. Then the same process. Fortunately, we don't have to go through the gods. This is another important part of this.
When Savitri,
you can go directly to the Supreme.
Yes.
And now we have the Divine Mother.
When Savitri meets the Madonnas,
yes,
she has to fulfill
each
the
of
part
them.
that's missing.
Yes. So this is the other part of this zigzag of the God, that this is a pathway, but you don't have to go through the zigzag of the gods. If you surrender directly to the Divine Mother, she will do everything. And she will bring in whatever powers are necessary and work in you and release the godlike elements in you, uplift them, harmonize them. So, the zigzag of the gods, enough of the zigzag, we need not follow. And upward points, the spirit's climbing fire. It cannot. The aspiration cannot rest with these halfway homes. And last couple of lines, and we'll stop. Maybe last one line. It's a long line. We'll just read it, and we'll read it again next time we meet. This breath of 100-hued felicity, and its pure, heightened figure of time's joy. Mark the words. Not the eternal joy, but the joy of the eternal, which is reflecting in time. We can receive that touch. Tossed upon waves of flawless happiness, hammered into single beats of ecstasy. This fraction of the Spirit's integer, again he is reminding us, this paradise, fraction, it's not the whole. Fraction of the Spirit's integer, caught into a passionate greatness of extremes, this limited being lifted to zenith bliss. Zenith is a word, the highest top that you can find. Happy to enjoy one touch of things supreme, packed into its sealed small infinity, its endless time-made world, outfacing time, a little output of God's vast delight. We can close with a small little anecdote or a letter of Sri Aurobindo. When Sri Aurobindo writes a letter to Barin, obviously there must be question, what are you seeking now? He has already revealed in Uttarpada Bharshan that I have seen the one divine everywhere. He had the experience of the Nirvana. So there is a long letter to Barin. He says, now you come out, prepare humanity, tie your bundles like that. So Aurobindo writes, what Lele gave me, what I experienced in Adipur, were just the starting point. They are not the ultimate. And then he describes very beautifully that I feel, I believe or I know, something like that. But that feel word has to be seen in not feeling the way we feel. That an average Vedantin touches nothing but the hem of the transcendent. And the average Bhakta only tastes a little bit of that joy. And he is happy and satisfied. It's a letter to Barinda. So he is not ready for that. He is not content only with that, because that is fine for individual yoga and for making a few more intoxicants, mendicants on the way. But he wants the perfect perfection. And this cannot satisfy his spirit's highest thirst.
To close, and you don't have to answer. Have you met anyone, at least in the overmind?
Well, I'm aware of that. So, but I'll leave it at that, since you gave me the option of not answering. Beautiful. So we are at the little mind. We'll come to our mind, then we will see. Okay.